Happy 4th of July week. We know we got a lot of people on vacation this week, so glad that those of you that are here are here. I'm going to kick us off this morning, and I have 4 things. Don't be alarmed. They'll each be brief to talk about real quickly before I hand it over to Mark and then Rosie. So first, yesterday was July 1st, and that's got 2 things on my mind. One, it's now officially been a year since we saw some major change to our license law and got to begin signing buyer agency contracts, and kind of made me reflect a little bit yesterday. I was thinking about the fact that last March and April, there was some fear and a fair amount of uncertainty about what was going to happen going forward, and would our commission be impacted? Would it go down? And would buyers sign these agreements? And I know you've heard this from us before, but I wanted to take another minute to congratulate you for how you really leaned into this change and you navigated it with confidence. We've actually seen our commission on the buy side go up a little in the last year, and so those are all big wins. And now it just kind of feels already, I think, like another part of doing business, and feels fairly natural, I think, to most of us. So congrats to you for that, for leaning into change and continuing to do so as we're going to navigate some more changes to our industry, it sounds like, as we get towards the end of the year. So the other thing that occurred to me as it relates to July 1st is that means 2025 is halfway over. Which is kind of hard to believe, I think. Feels like it was just January. But that means it's a really good time to kind of check back in on your business plan. We're halfway through the year, maybe revisit those goals, review the things that you said you were going to do, check in, see how you're doing. This can be a pretty slow week in real estate. And if you're not busy in your business, it's a great time to work on your business, as we say. So it's a really good time to revisit that business plan, check in, see if you can make any adjustments for Q3 and Q4, and keep motoring towards a strong finish for 2025. I have 2 ninja isms that I also want to talk about. That's my 3rd thing and my 4th thing this morning. And the first, I know, so about 100 of you have been through Ninja, and I know some more of you have read the book. So if you're not familiar with Ninja concepts, I'm going to talk about 2 things related to Ninja, but I'll explain just real quick for those of you who've not been through Ninja. I want to talk about your life list. And the reason this is coming up is because I first went through Ninja in 2017, and I recently uncovered the first life list I wrote and found it in some old, paper, as you do. And it was really fun to look back and read it and realize that there were a handful of significant things that I could check off on that list. So a life list is the idea of sitting down, taking some time, and making a list of things that you would really like to accomplish. And they can be outlandish, they can be small, they can be simple, like life organization hacks. It could be your dream vacation, be all kinds of different things. And the idea is that you make this list and you keep it somewhere where you can look at it easily every day. Ninjas look at it right before they write their affirmations in the morning and as a part of their morning routine. But if you're not all the way into the Ninja thing yet, that's fine. I think a life list can still be really effective. The idea is to keep your why in front of you. And so what motivates you, and why do we work the hours we work and as hard as we work, especially in the crazy season. And it's a good reminder. So I had a lot of fun being able to check off some things on that list when I found it. And I just thought an appropriate time to remind you all that you might want to work on your life list and get it out, keep it where you can put it in front of you. Incidentally, just a nerdy Megan story. One of the things on my life list in summer of 2017 was that I really wanted to sing with a group again. And it was that fall that I managed to figure out how to put together my little community choir that I'm still a part of today. And so it's just funny how powerful that can be to write that list down and look at it every day. So something to think about. And then last but not least, I want to share one of my favorite Ninja hacks that I learned from a Ninja instructor, in 2017, my first Ninja instructor, and they talked about it this week on their Monday email. But I know not all of you get those, and so I want to just take a minute and talk about it. And that's the idea of So y'all know that writing handwritten notes is a big part of Ninja. And the goal is to write a few a day and to write them in the morning before you get busy. And as much as I wish we were all doing that flawlessly, we know that's not always how this business works, and it can be hard to stick to that every morning. So the idea that I learned a long time ago and I love and I embrace is the idea of carrying basically a note writing kit, if you will, in your work bag. So I have mine here. Mine has a llama on the front of it because I'm like a 12-year-old trapped in a middle-aged body. But it's basically got note cards, stamps, all the things I need, love stickers, obviously, to write a note card. And I keep it with me. So if I'm running early for an appointment and I have 30 minutes and I don't have anything to do, instead of doom scrolling, I can write a note. If I'm on one side of town and I'm kind of stuck there because I have another appointment and I don't want to drive back across town, whatever, if I have a spare 15, 30 minutes, it's really fun to be able to use that time to have a note, have it written, ready to go. I'm so bad, such a perfectionist, that I won't write a handwritten note if I don't have the right kind of ink pen. I'm just letting out all my nerdiness today. So I even have a couple ink pens in here, and I keep a spreadsheet of addresses of the people that I want to make sure I'm in touch with each year. And so I know you have addresses in your phone, but like it's just a visual way for me to look back at who I've written notes to and so forth. So just a little trick I thought I would share because I love it, and encourage you to think about it. And it might be an easy way to get a few more notes into your daily and weekly routine. So those were my 4 things. Congrats on a year of buyer agency. Maybe take some time in the next week or 2 to look back at your business plan, think about having a life list, and maybe simplify writing your notes each week. That's all I got. Mark, you're up.
Thanks, Megan. Morning, everybody. Thanks for joining. Happy Wednesday. I'm going to hit on a report that came out this last week. This is from the National Association of Realtors. They teamed up with Realtor.com, and I think there's some really good stuff in this. Before I dive into it, though, I'll just say to comment on our perspective of our association. So reminder that if you're a real estate broker, you don't necessarily have to be a realtor to practice, and it is an investment. And so I think as a business owner, we should think about that investment in terms of return on that investment and what's the value exchange between us and our association. And there's all sorts of things about that. I think generally speaking, realtors have a more clear understanding of that value exchange with the local version of their association. So for us, that's our local boards, right? So 3 different ones here. And then maybe with the state association, because we use their forms. And then y'all have heard me, at least once a month, I'm referencing the IIR Housing Hub, the data center, which I think is really good. The National Association, it's been under fire, and for really good reason, honestly, over the last several years from a bunch of different angles. I think as realtors, we can at the same time be critical of our association and want better, and recognize there are some things that our association does for us that we could not really even come close to replicating for the amount of money that we invest. So I think it's a double-edged sword. I think there's a balance here in terms of our view. One of the things that our National Association does, so in my view, where the value really sits with our National Association, number one is in political advocacy. For example, right now, NAR very likely is the most powerful entity trying to push for reconsideration of interest rates. And then there's all these other things that NAR has pushed for over the last several decades, including, say, for example, maintaining 1031 exchanges, things like that, private owner property rights. There's things that they do. So I'm not like a NAR apologist. I think there's lots to be critical of. But this report, I think, was a really good example of the data, the economic research, the data, the information that NAR puts out. I think we might just take it for granted as like, yeah, there's really good data out there about the national housing market. I'll just encourage you to say, don't take it for granted. Recognize this is a part of why you pay dues. So if you didn't realize that, some of you might be thinking, I don't pay dues to the National Association of Realtors. You do. When do you send your annual dues to, so for in Indianapolis, this would be when you send your dues to MIBOR. A portion of those dues goes to the Indiana Association of Realtors, and a portion of those dues goes to the National Association. So you are funding the report that we're about to take a look at. Cool. Okay, so I'm going to start by actually sharing a chart from Housing Wire that was also from this last week that I think illustrates the need for the report from NAR. And then there's several charts in the report from NAR. The NAR Realtor.com report comes in the form of a slideshow that we're going to send out to you later today. There's tons of information in it. We're basically going to look at the three main charts, but there's a lot of narrative. There's a lot of paragraphs. So we're not going to take a look at many of those, but I would encourage you to flip through it, read through it later today if you can. So I'll send that out. But before I do that, or before we actually get to that, I'm going to share this chart from a Housing Wire article that I thought was a good kickoff. So all of this is in the category of inventory and affordability. I think that's the number one topic in the housing industry, and for very good reason. I was talking with the staff yesterday that I think perhaps in the realtor brokerage world, Clear Cooperation, Compass, Zillow, that might be the most talked about thing right now in kind of our segment of the housing industry. But in the housing industry in general, the number one issue is affordability. And this has affected you and your clients to a significant degree. And I think what we're actually going to see here in this data is it's basically 3/4 of the marketplace. Only the top 25% of the marketplace hasn't been significantly negatively impacted by the affordability crisis, particularly in the last 5 years. So I'll say that again, 3 out of every 4 consumers, at least 3 out of every 4, have been significantly negatively impacted regarding the affordability crisis. And we're going to look at a lot of charts and then hit on, okay, what does this data do for us as realtors? How should we respond? So this chart here from Housing Wire, this is number one of their 4 charts that illustrate the housing affordability crisis. And I thought this was a really interesting visual. So the 4 different colors that you see here represent the 100 largest markets in the United States and what percentage of those 100 have ratios of home prices relative to income that would be attainable. So like that gray area is how many of the metros have a ratio at 3 or lower, which would be considered an affordable marketplace. So the more gray you see, the more cities in the United States are affordable, right? So then the more red you see, the more cities in the United States are unattainable to the majority of their population. This goes all the way back to 1990. So going back 35 years, we see until the housing, like the bubble, right, in 04, 05, 06, leading up into 07, prices had jumped quite a bit in that period of time. Rates weren't high, but they weren't as low as we were accustomed to for a while. And so we saw a dip in affordability. You see there in the housing recession of 07, 08, 09, 10, there's like this correction. Things become a little bit more affordable. The interest rates helped out a lot there. The federal government lowered interest rates quite a bit to try to recover from that recession. So we saw a little bit of a jump, but then we've been on this steady decline of affordability since the recovery. we see the really big drop that we all know about. We've all experienced it. You look from 2020 to 2021, what happened with interest rates going way down and this boom of the number of reasons to move, right? So people were experiencing more reasons to move, interest rates were low. That led to a really big price increase. And then by 2022, rates went up. And this, this isn't good news. I think it's our job, though, to take a look at it. And if we went from, this is in my lifetime, 1990, I was 9 years old. I wasn't a home buyer at that point in time, but this wasn't that long ago in history. If we went from 75%, so 75 of the 100 largest metros had a very affordable price point, to now that's essentially 5 of the 100 largest metros. So 75 of the 100 to 5 of the 100 had what we would consider to be an attainable, affordable price point for their average house. That's a really big deal. I think it's a unique way of looking at this. Okay, I'm going to stop that screen share and I'm going to jump into this NAR PowerPoint presentation. So again, this is the National Association of Realtors and Realtor.com teaming up. And I'm already on the 5th slide here because there's just tons of information. We're going to look at this one paragraph and then 3 charts. But I would encourage you, when this comes out later today, to read through it. I think it's really helpful stuff. So this first paragraph, I think you could see there that I have highlighted. Sorry, it's the second paragraph, but the one I have highlighted. I thought this was if you're looking for the summary statement of this slideshow, I think it's this paragraph. Households earning $75,000 a year, often made up of teachers, nurses, and skilled trade workers, can afford 21.2% of listings as of March 2025. That's a slight improvement from 20.8% last year, and it's the biggest gain of any income group. I'm going to pause there for a second. So this is what we've been talking about over the last year. In our marketplaces, state of Indiana, the Midwest, and across the country, inventory has been going up. That's good news. It helps affordability. So we see in this data just a little bit of a tweak. So the median earner is $75,000 a year, which makes up a huge chunk of our population, can afford just barely more in terms of the number of listings on the marketplace, right? That's good movement. However, the last sentence in this paragraph, however, it's still less than half of the access this group had before the pandemic, when nearly 49% of listings were within reach. So in 2019, which was a price growth market, we considered it a good market, a $75,000 a year earner could access 49% of the homes on the marketplace in the United States. It actually dipped all the way down to below 20 and is now inching its way back up. Okay. Don't mean to bring about just solely bad news, but let's take a look at a couple different ways to look at this. Okay, so right here, I'm going to help you try to gather what you're looking at with this chart. All the way over on the right is what an economist would say a balanced market would look like, healthy. And by balance, there's no scenario where every income bracket can afford every house on the marketplace. What they're looking at here is what percentage of homes on the market should each income bracket be able to afford if there is like a 1-to-1 spread. So in other words, if let's say 60% of the people in the US make up $100,000 or more, well, then they're saying, we'd like to be in a spot where those people could afford 60% of the listings, right? And you could take that up and down the scale. So all the way over on the right would be good conditions. In March of 19, it looked pretty darn good. It was a price growth market. Things were moving relatively quickly, but the inventory and the availability matched income demographics fairly close. So I'm going to call attention to the $75,000 line, because that was the one. This is the one that has experienced the most movement, particularly in the wrong direction from 19 to 24. So look here at $75,000 right there, and go across. We're saying in a balanced market, they ought to be able to attain 48% of the listings. So like half of every house listed, a $75,000 earner could seriously consider. Well, that's pretty much where we were in March of 19, all the way down to 20.8% in 24. And you see the movement here, pretty negative movement all the way up to a $200,000 earner. Meaning like where we were in 19 looks fairly close to what an economist would say is balanced. By 24, everybody earning $200,000 or less had seen, these are my words, a notably negative movement in what percentage of homes could they actually consider. And this, from this 50 to 100 window, that's where the bulk of the housing market is, right? Most of the people earning $35,000 or less typically are not, it's not that they can't be home buyers. It's that they're generally not in the market to be home buyers. It's that 50 to 100 who either are in the home market because the conditions favor it, or would like to be in the home market and are not. And that's what we see reflected here in the chart. Okay, I think I've given you enough frustrating news, and I want to transition. Here real quick before I do. As you look through this, this is a very similar chart. It's looking at gross numbers instead of percentages. But this column over here on the very right, the red column, is another interesting way to look at this. This shows you the degree to which those price brackets are missing inventory right now. So you see it's at its highest with those median earners, 75,000 being the highest, followed by 50 and 100,000 as the second highest. So that's the marketplace that is the furthest short of inventory. What that means, by the way, they do hit this in some of the paragraphs. It means something like 400,000 additional houses listed at $260,000. Like that gap, one way to look at that is to think about basically 8,000 houses in every state in the United States. It wouldn't obviously pan out that way, but let's just say if every state could just add 8,000 houses to their inventory at $260,000, the gap gets filled. Okay. Where this slideshow goes from here is it divides these 100 largest marketplaces into three groups. Which group is getting closer to balance for the median earner, which group is stuck where they are, and which group is falling further behind. Here's where I think this transitions to some optimism for us, some gratitude to think through, hey, there are advantages to working in a marketplace like Indiana, right? And this is something where our state, obviously most of the population in Indiana is centered towards the middle of the state, and that's the 100 largest markets. That's the market that's going to get the attention in Indiana. But as we know from our housing hub, every aspect, every part of Indiana tends to track pretty consistently with central Indiana in terms of affordability and inventory. So I think it's safe to apply this to the entire state. We are definitely falling in the first bucket. We are one of the areas that are getting closer to balance. I think this is good news for us. And this is what I'm going to highlight in terms of what does that mean for realtors beyond just interesting information that might be frustrating, right? So here we go. They highlighted the top, see, it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 of the 100 largest markets in the country. These are the 8 highlights in terms of those that are getting closer to balance. This affordability distribution score in 2024 and 2025, I think it's a pretty interesting way to look at this. So just to try to shed a little bit of light on how this works, you see Indianapolis, Carmel, Anderson. Once again, shout out to Anderson for always getting themselves mentioned in these things. I love it. Congratulations. Again, no surprise that Carmel manages to get themselves mentioned, but somebody at Anderson's doing their economic development work. So Indianapolis, Carmel, Anderson, we see in 2024 is the green line. And then we see this pretty good jump. So they were at a 0.84 with 1 being the target. 1 means you're a balanced marketplace. The $75,000 earner has the right number of homes to see. So we were at 84% last year. We're at 91% this year. That's a big jump. And we're one of the closest to the balanced market score. Now, I think there's a couple ways to look at that. One way might be, well, my first-time homebuyers don't feel that way, which is fair, right? Because if a balanced market score is 1 and we're declaring 0.91 as, relatively speaking, really good, we're still actually saying it's an imbalanced marketplace. There's not enough homes for sale for the $50,000, $75,000, $100,000 earner. That's a fact. It's true in all 3 of our areas. It's true across the state of Indiana. However, there are 2 reasons to look at this as good news. Number 1 is we continue to be one of the more attainable marketplaces in the United States. That is good news for our culture, for our population, and for our profession. Number 2, not only are we one of the more attainable, we're actually moving in the right direction faster than most marketplaces. So I think there's a lot to be really concerned about, frustrated with, critical of in terms of leadership and what they're doing about this. But I think let's acknowledge we are fairly attainable still, and we're moving in the right direction faster than most of our peers. Okay. I want to highlight one more chart. Another way to look at this, you can take a look at it. This really breaks it down by price point and what are the gaps there. Oh, went too far. Okay, there we go. Y'all see that? We've looked at a lot of similar maps, but I think this is a helpful way to look at, like, outside of Indianapolis, do we see a pattern here in terms of these 3 buckets? So I mentioned, sorry, Alex. Alex is getting nauseous, or her eye is switching from the slideshow. Okay, so number 1 group is the group that's moving in the right direction, getting closer to balance. That's the dark blue. The light blue or gray is the not really moving in either direction. And then we're going to call that salmon, is the group that's moving in the wrong direction. So every time there's a chart that looks anything like this, we see the pattern. It's East Coast, West Coast, and generally Southern that continues to experience this, the percentage of people in those marketplaces that can afford a home is moving in the wrong direction. It's already low, and it's moving in the wrong direction. Whereas the Midwest tends to be the area moving in the right direction. And I'm going to stop my share here and just kind of give a little bit of commentary for a realtor on like, okay, what does that do for us? Well, number one, I think is mindset and perspective, right? I suppose partially what I'm saying there is like, hey, it could be worse. We could be in a marketplace that has priced out a higher percentage of consumers than Indianapolis has. But I think more practical than that even is, what does this say about the next decade in Indiana? So just put your Econ 101 supply and demand impact to a marketplace. What does this say about the next decade of the housing market in Indiana? Give you a second to think about that. Welcome to jump in the chat and comment if you'd like, but so if you're thinking along the lines of, does this increase demand in Indiana? The answer is yes. This is how a marketplace works, that if there is a consumer, for example, who, for whatever reason, has job transiency, they are more likely to be attracted to a marketplace like Indianapolis Carmel Anderson because homes are more attainable, right? There's clearly other factors to that. So what happens in a marketplace like 2019, where a higher percentage of homes were attainable, affordability was less important, less critical, rates were really low. So when job transiency happened in 19, where did the population gravitate? South and west, right? A higher percentage of homes were attainable. Therefore, if they had the option, the consumer was more likely to move south or west. Now that attainability has become critical, I think housing affordability crisis is the right description for what's happening. They're more likely to gravitate to markets like ours. So what that means for the next decade, your job as a realtor, number one, the prospects of being a realtor in a marketplace like that are really good. It projects high future transaction count, real estate health, growing demand, growing population. Okay, so that's good news for us. For our consumer, it brings me back to this role that realtors play in influencing decision-making, especially for first-time buyers. So I like to think of it this way. If this chart is data that doesn't feel personal or human, distill this down. If I'm going to be the motivational speaker version of me in this call, I would say this: there is some potential buyer represented by someone on this call. I think this is a safe guess. There is one potential home buyer represented by somebody on this call who is so much on the fence that if their realtor helps them understand this data and the likely trajectory of housing in central Indiana over the next 10 years, they will get off the fence and they will buy instead of not buying. And that will make a massive difference in their financial outcomes for the rest of their life. Now, we don't tell our consumers what to do. We do not have that power. That is not our right. That's not what our license allows us to do. But many of our consumers look to us to provide good information. this is where I think this becomes truly relevant. Yeah, I like the way that Julie just explained that. She said, yeah, she's shoving that client right over the fence. So anytime a consumer feels pressure from us, like as if it's a sales pitch, number one, gross. Number two, it's not going to work anyway. They're smarter than that. They see through it. So I'm not talking sales pitch. I'm talking there's real information here that could help a consumer understand buying today and buying in the proverbial, like, figurative tomorrow, 2 years, 4 years, 6 years, whatever that is. They're not equal. Particularly if we are in a spot that is going to increase demand. So I would actually show some of this and say, hey, number one, it's hard out there. Some of this data validates why it's hard out there. But number two, take a look at the areas that are likely going to experience the highest increase in demand over the next 10 years. What does that say to you as a potential home buyer? And sometimes I think it might be helpful for a realtor working with that first-time home buyer to step out for a moment of, okay, we just looked at another 2 houses that you didn't like, right? We're in your price point. We're struggling to find something, or we got beat out again, right? It might be good to say, let's sit down at a coffee shop or in a conference room, not focused in on a particular house, but reframe how you might think about the home buying process and look at some data, or maybe it's a video call or something you share with them via email with some commentary. And that's something I always try to express this. If Megan or I could be helpful in like scripting that, like going back and forth with you on it, helping you think through how does this apply to somebody, we'd love to be able to do that. So you'll get the slideshow later today with this video. If you ever have any questions in this arena, please feel free to reach out. That's all I got for today. Handing it off to Rosie to finish up the call. Thanks for joining and have a good Wednesday.
Thanks, Mark. Okay, team, my portion is going to be very quick today, but I want to talk to you about 3 different forms that I want to make sure you know how to find on platform. So we've had a couple of questions recently about, hey, I have an open house coming up, or I have a listing coming up, and I really want to get those posted on our @property social media page. Like, what's the best way to get that information to you? And I want to show you where to find them. So if you are in platform and you hover over marketing here, scroll down and hit on social media forms. And you're going to see 2 different forms. One is an open house promotion and one is a new listing post request. So our open house promotion, if you're holding an open house on the weekend, we ask that we have that information by Thursday by midday. So that way we can get the post ready and get it ready to post. Typically those posts on Friday and say like, hey, this is our weekend open house roundup, so you guys can see everything that's coming. And then you can also have Aubrey post about a new listing. We can't post about every single listing that comes into our property, or our page would just be straight houses all the time. But we want to know about what's new and what's coming and how we can help you out in that. So feel free to utilize those. And then the last thing I wanted to point out is how you can order new signage and business cards through us. So if you are looking to, order new signs, whether that's for sale signs, open house signs, writers, anything like that, you're going to look under this resources and hit order forms. And then you're going to see 2 buttons, order business cards or order signage. And you can fill out those forms to order those things. And then my last little plug here is when you're searching for these things, you can always go down here and hover under that. But you can also just type forms up here, and that's going to pull up any order forms, social media forms here as well. That's my favorite way to search for things. But obviously you have to know like the name of the thing that you're searching for. So that's it for today. I just wanted to give you guys a little more wayfinding, and please use those social media forms. We really want to highlight stuff for you. So that's all I have. Mark, Megan, any final comments before we head off? Okay, guys, happy 4th of July. Hope it's a lovely family holiday weekend for you guys. Cheers.